This overview covers Hebrew nouns. It's helpful to begin with an English definition of noun before we move to discussing Hebrew nouns. So the definition of a noun in English is that it is one of three things. It describes a person, a place, or a thing. The same basic definition applies to Hebrew nouns as well. Hebrew nouns convey either a person, it could be a person's name, or it may just be a term alluding to a person, such as man or woman. Nouns can also allude to a place. These are called proper nouns usually, such as the noun Virginia Beach is a proper noun or a place. We can also come up with other nouns that convey place, such as earth is a place, or home can also convey a place. Thing is the third definition, and thing essentially defines any other type of noun. Book, pencil, rock, paper, all of those nouns convey something or some element. The same basic definitions apply to Hebrew nouns as well. Nouns are one of the basic building blocks of a sentence for any language. Hebrew nouns convey a couple of specific things, however. Hebrew nouns convey gender. So gender in Hebrew nouns, every noun either is associated with the masculine gender or the feminine gender. English is not exactly the same. While we do have some nouns that convey gender naturally, like the word man is associated with the masculine gender and the word woman is naturally associated with the feminine gender, Hebrew nouns associate gender with every noun. So the noun eretz, for example, means earth, and eretz is actually a feminine noun. Now, we wouldn't have a natural distinction necessarily to automatically assume that earth has to be feminine, but in Hebrew, earth is automatically associated with a feminine gender. There are plenty of other nouns that don't have a natural association with gender in Hebrew, but nonetheless, every noun in Hebrew is associated with one of these two genders. It's either considered masculine or feminine. Secondly, every Hebrew noun conveys number. Now, number essentially just defines how many of a noun there are, how many of something we are dealing with. And we break this down in English into two basic distinctions, whether something is singular or plural. For example, the noun book is singular. Book, the way it's spelled there, conveys there's only one book. There are not more than one book. However, we can pluralize book by adding an S on the end, books. That suggests that we have a plural subject or a plural noun. Hebrew also conveys singular and plural nouns, but it also has one other distinction for the number class, and that's called dual. So Hebrew nouns can either be singular, plural, or dual. All dual means is that there are two of something specifically. So the dual number is often associated with body parts that you would have two of, such as eyes or hands. So Hebrew would essentially spell nouns like this, meaning we could actually translate them in a way that they would mean two hands or two eyes or 2 feet, etc. So dual simply just means there are two of something. Now, to take a look at the English plural nouns again, in English, we do actually spell nouns differently when we pluralize them. So a typical rule that we have in English is that we add an S on the end. We looked at that when we saw books, that we just added an S on the end. There are plenty of other nouns that we pluralize by changing the ending. We add an S. Horse becomes horses, plural. Mare becomes mares. House becomes houses. And face becomes faces. So in each of these nouns, we just simply add an S. Now, there are several other rules in English that we can pluralize nouns by altering the spelling in some sense. This is just to demonstrate that in English, we do pluralize nouns by changing the spelling in some way. Sometimes that means adding an ending. Sometimes that means changing the internal spelling. For example, mouse becomes mice in its plural form. That particular term does not involve an ending change, but it involves an internal vowel change. So these examples show you that nouns can change their spelling in English when we change the pluralization. We change from a singular to plural noun. Hebrew nouns also have a system of endings. Now these endings convey two things. They convey the gender of the noun, and secondly, they also convey the number of the noun. Here's a chart of the 6 noun endings to familiarize yourself with in this course. They are distinguished by, first of all, their gender. The left column conveys the masculine endings, and the right column conveys the feminine endings, specifically for feminine nouns. And then we see them broken up further by their number, singular, plural, or dual. Now, unlike Greek, nouns do not have a system of case endings. So what you see here, this chart of 6 endings, is what you get in Hebrew. There are not a special set of endings for nominative nouns or dative nouns or genitive nouns, etc. Hebrew does not go that in depth with their noun endings. It's just simply this chart of noun endings to learn. So let's take a look at these endings that are all affixed to the end of the noun sus. Samek, shurik, samet spells the noun sus, which means horse. So by using that as our root noun form, we can see what sus looks like when all of these different endings are added to the end of it. Now I might start off this discussion by saying that sus is a masculine singular noun. In Hebrew, I did mention that we have 6 endings, and in reality there are only 5 endings. Because masculine singular nouns, the form for them is simply to have no ending. So they're actually identified by the fact that they do not have a noun ending. So in essence, we know them by the absence of a noun ending. I might also mention that there's an asterisk here next to sus, and the note below says that the singular form is usually the lexical form, and this is for Hebrew nouns. So the singular form essentially is the form without an ending. That's the form that you would find in a Hebrew lexicon if you went to look up a noun in a lexicon. A lexicon is simply a dictionary of Hebrew terms, and it's where we go to find them. That means if you find a noun with any of these endings on it, essentially, for the most part, you'd want to take the ending off and then look it up in a lexicon. Now, the only difference is that some nouns are feminine and they end in a comma te. So we'll look at all of these endings together. So masculine singular, again, sus, it's known as the absence of an ending. Masculine singular has no ending. Next, we move to the feminine singular ending. And the feminine singular ending is a comets he vowel added to the end of a noun. So note, we still have our regular noun here, sus, samek, shurik, samek, and to the end of that is added a comets he. The comets he essentially means we have a feminine singular noun, and in Hebrew, in this case, it actually turns the meaning of the term from horse to mare. So susa is a female horse, essentially. So the comets he is an ending for feminine singular nouns. Then let's look at masculine plural. Masculine plural nouns, again, this is the ending for a noun that's masculine, but it also happens to be plural. The ending for masculine plural nouns is a hirik yod vowel plus a final mem. Sus im is what we get. The ending hirik yod mem sounds like im. That's its pronunciation. So we add im to the end of sus, samek, shurik samek, and we get the word sus im. Sus im. We translate that as horses. So it essentially takes our masculine singular term sus and it pluralizes it to susim, horses. And simply, it does that simply by the addition of this ending, the hirik yod mem together. Feminine plural nouns also have their own ending. Where susa is the word for mare, it's a feminine singular noun. Susot is mares. Note, we still have our same root here, sus, shurik, samek, shurik, samek, with an ending holem vav tav in red. So the holem vav is a vowel followed by a tav, and that becomes our ending. Together, the pronunciation for that holem vav tav is oat, oat. So sus, oat becomes mares. All right, so far we have learned the 4 basic forms that we find in Hebrew nouns. Sus, The masculine singular nouns will have no ending. Feminine singular nouns will have a comet's hey for the most part. Comet's hey turns sus to susa, mare. Susim, the heroic yod mem ending, tells us it's a masculine plural noun, horses. And the whole vav tav ending on sus, susot, tells us that we have a feminine plural noun. We translate that as mares, plural. As mentioned, Hebrew has one other form for what we call dual nouns, meaning we have two of something. The form looks very much like the masculine plural noun. Again, the masculine plural noun is a heroic yod mem. The dual looks a lot like that, except for look, it has an extra vowel and the construction is just a little bit different. Note that under the last consonant of our word sus, we have a vowel below it, which is a patak. The patak goes below that last letter, followed by a yod, and the yod is followed by its own vowel, a heroic, and then followed by a mem. The pronunciation for this construction is ayim, ayim. So to put that together with the root sus, we get sus ayim, sus ayim, instead of susim. Hear the difference. Susim is the masculine plural, susayim is the dual. The sound just changes a little bit, and the spelling also changes a little bit as well. We are less concerned with the dual noun endings for this class, so you don't really need to be concerned with it. I just mention it here so that you are aware that Hebrew has three types of number categories, singular, plural, and dual. And the dual, of course, looks a lot like the masculine plural. It's just slightly different. Note that that same dual ending is added on feminine nouns as well. So susayim, two horses. Susatayim becomes two mares. So again, we still have that same ending, the patak, yod, heroic, and the mem. Here's another example of just a feminine noun, Torah. As mentioned, a lot of feminine nouns end in a comet's hey. That can help us identify a good bit of feminine nouns when that happens. So the word Torah, which means law or instruction, it naturally ends in a comet's hey. That's its feminine singular form. So if you looked this up in a lexicon, Torah is its singular form, and that's how you'd find it listed in a Hebrew lexicon, Torah, and then you'd find a definition discussing the fact that it means law or instruction. Note how Torah alters its form when it turns plural. The comet's hey ending is switched out for the feminine plural ending, the whole vav tav, Torot, becomes laws. And if we wanted to say two laws, we could use the dual ending, Toratayim, Toratayim. Now you might note in some of these feminine nouns I've talked about that end in a comet's hey in their singular form. In the dual form, that ending hey essentially just turns to a tav. So we get, instead of Torah ayim, we get Toratayim with a tav. Again, you do not need to memorize that rule or know that for any kind of assessment for this class, but I just mention it so you can follow a little closer to the way nouns are working. So the four basic endings that you want to learn are the masculine singular, to know that it's the absence of any kind of noun ending, to know that the feminine singular ending is a comet's hey, and you want to know that the masculine plural noun ends in a heroic yod mem, and the feminine plural nouns end in a holam vav tav. So those are the four forms you want to focus on in this class. It is helpful to note that not every feminine singular noun, just so you're mildly aware of this, not every feminine singular noun ends in a comet's hey. Other feminine singular nouns may simply end in a tav, such as the word bat is daughter. Bat is also a feminine singular noun, and you might ask at this point, how would I know if a noun is feminine or masculine for sure? The only way really to know is to look it up in a lexicon. A lexicon in Hebrew will always tell you whether a noun is masculine masculine or feminine. Sometimes you don't necessarily know. You would just need to look it up in a lexicon. For example, the next word, da'at, dalit, patak, ayin, patak, tav. Note how it ends in a tav. Da'at means knowledge. Knowledge, you wouldn't know instinctively whether knowledge is a masculine or feminine noun. You would essentially need to look up da'at to know for sure if it's masculine or feminine. But note that I am, helping you to see how not every feminine singular noun ends in a comma te. Some of them end naturally in a tav, and that's also sort of a feminine singular marker. Berit is the word for covenant. It also ends in a tav. It also happens to be feminine singular. Malkut is the word for reign or kingship. It also ends in a tav, and it's also feminine singular. Mishmeret is the word for obligation. Mishmeret means obligation, and note how it ends in a tav. It's also feminine singular. Again, though, if you weren't positive, you could always look a word up in a lexicon. Now, there are plenty of other feminine singular nouns that neither end in a comma te, nor do they end in a tav. For example, the word eretz, aleph, resh, tzadeh. It ends in a tzadeh. It is the last letter in the word eretz, and eretz is actually feminine singular, and the only way to know that for sure would be to look it up in a lexicon. Now, to give you some practice with identifying the form of a noun, we will parse a couple here together. Now, we want to fall back when we parse, because this is an introductory class and a very brief introduction on Hebrew, we will fall back on our 4 basic forms and use those for practice. That is, consider that every form, a noun that doesn't have an ending is masculine singular. So we'll use that as our basic mold for learning nouns for this point. So sus is the absence of an ending. It's masculine singular. We will also consider that the feminine nouns, the typical ending for them is a comma te. So comma te is a typical ending for feminine singular nouns. And also, this is unchangeable. Masculine plural nouns end in hirik yod mem, and feminine plural nouns end in cholam vav tav. So based on those 4 forms, let's practice parsing some nouns together. Now, you don't even need to know what these nouns mean to be able to parse them. All I'm asking you to begin to learn at this point is to look and see what form it is, what the parsing is, what is the gender and the number of these nouns. That the gender and number is conveyed by the ending that we have affixed to the end of a noun. And again, if there is no ending, assume it's masculine singular. So the word yeled, yod, sigol, lamed, sigol, dalet, yeled, note it does not have any noun ending affixed to the end of it. So for that reason, we can parse it as a masculine, gender, and singular number. So it's a masculine singular noun. Again, masculine singular nouns in Hebrew have no ending. Number 2, we have the word torot, torot. So for parsing it, again, look for the ending and see what you can identify there. Based on the 4 forms that we're dealing with in this course, there is an ending on the end of this noun, and it's a cholam vav tav. Torot is parsed as a feminine plural noun. There you can see the cholam vav tav in red, very dominant now as it's highlighted, and that's our feminine plural ending. Torot means laws and instructions, but again, the goal of this brief little introductory practice is not so you can know each of these nouns, just asking you to learn how to parse them and look at the ending. Number 3, we have the word malka, malka. Again, when we're parsing, look for the ending. What ending do you find on this particular term? You should at this point begin to see the comma te on the end. The comma te is our ending for feminine singular nouns. Again, I've mentioned briefly that not every feminine singular noun ends with a comma te, but for now that's a helpful association to just learn the basics of noun endings. So malka is feminine singular noun because it ends in a comma te. Next we have adama, adama, the noun adama. Again, look for the ending and see what you see. Note again we have another comma te on the end. The comma te is the feminine singular ending. Just like on number 3, malka, Adama. You can hear the ah sound. That's the feminine singular ending. Number 5, we have the word melek. Melek. Melek actually means king. That's its translation. And note, if we were looking for an ending, we wouldn't find one. This particular term ends in a final calf. That's not one of our noun endings that we've learned, so that tells us there is no noun ending here. For that reason, we actually have a masculine singular noun, melek, melek. And number 6, we have another noun, isha, isha. Looking for the ending, we see that isha ends in a kametz hey. That kametz hey, again, is our feminine singular noun ending, so we can parse it as feminine singular. Isha means wife or woman. In this case, we can see why number 6 is feminine singular, because isha, woman or wife, is naturally associated with the feminine gender. Some of these other nouns, however, such as number 4, adama, means ground, and it happens to be feminine singular. Again, we wouldn't know instinctively necessarily that ground is a feminine gender, but the kametz hey on the end helps us to see that it is being marked as a feminine singular gender. And indeed, if you looked up adama in a lexicon, you would also see the letter F next to it to tell us that it's feminine. Let's try a couple more. On number 7, we have the word kohanim. Kohanim. Look for the ending on this and see what you can see. There is a pattern here. It's one of our lengthier endings. It's a hirik yod mem. And according to that chart we learned at the beginning of this session, the hirik yod mem is our masculine plural ending. So the hirik yod together is our masculine plural ending. Kohanim is translated as priests. Kohen is priest. Kohanim is priests, plural. Number 8, we have the word amim. Amim. Again, the ending is hirik yod mem, just like number 7, so we parse it again as a masculine plural. So in this stage of the game, we're just looking for the patterns, the endings added to the end of these nouns. Amim is translated as peoples, plural, and it's a masculine plural noun. Otot on number 9, otot. Look at the ending here. This word looks pretty funny because it's got a holem vav tav repeated twice, but the second holem vav tav, that's actually our ending. That's our feminine plural ending. Ot, ot simply means sign. Ot is signs, plural, and it's a feminine noun. With the ot on the end, it makes it feminine plural. Kokavim. Kokavim is our next word. Kokavim. Look at the ending. We have a clear hirik yod mem. That's a masculine plural ending. Kokav means star. Kokavim is stars, plural. Sefer. Sefer is our noun on number 11. Note, sefer does not have any kind of ending, no ending at all. Thus, according to our basic rule at this point, that makes it a masculine singular noun. And finally, we have on number 12, navi'im. Navi'im, note the ending, it's sticking out there, our regular pattern, the hirik yod mem. That's our masculine plural noun. Navi'im is prophets. Navi on its own is prophet. Navi'im is prophets, plural. The second part of this lesson on nouns will take us into the realm of what we call noun prefixes. Now, this is an unusual category that we can talk about nouns since we do not have a similar type of spelling or construction in English at all. So what happens is that Hebrew nouns can take 3 types of prefixes, and those prefixes are really the form of another letter in the alphabet. And it's helpful to have some introduction to these prefixes simply because this is such a frequent thing that you see in Hebrew. You see noun prefixes all over the place, and so it can be helpful that when you do word studies, just to be mildly familiar that Hebrew nouns can take these types of prefixes. The first type of prefix that we can have in Hebrew is that the definite article is actually a prefixed letter or consonant before a word or a noun. The definite article in English, it's just the word the, T-H-E. Now in English, obviously our definite article, it's a whole word on its own. But in Hebrew, the definite article, it's actually a letter. It's either a hey with a patak or a hey with a kametz. In both cases, the prefix sounds like ha, an H-A sound. And this ha would actually be prefixed to another noun to make it definite. We'll have some examples in just one moment, but I'll go through the other two classes of prefixes first. The second type of prefix we can have is a conjunction that translates to the word and. And is a conjunction in English. And that conjunction is, again, it's a prefix in Hebrew. It's a vav, often with a little simple shava below it. V is how we would pronounce that. V can also be a prefix to nouns, and when it does, it actually, we translate it as a whole word itself, is the word and. And our third category of noun prefixes we get in Hebrew are what we call prefixed prepositions. So there are actually three letters in Hebrew, the lamed, the kaf, and the beit, that stand for a preposition that can be, again, each of these letters can be a prefixed letter before another word. And each of these letters, it actually stands for a meaning itself. So the lamed, its meaning, when it's one of these prefix prepositions, it actually translates to either the words to or for in English. So la, as a prefix, can actually mean either one of these words. And the prefix ka, kaf with a simple shava, it actually means either one of these words, like or as. And lastly, we have the prefix beit. Va is how we would pronounce that. Va. Again, the beit, it does not have a dot in the middle. The dot is that letter. The dot can change the pronunciation for the beit. Without the dot, it sounds like a V. Va. And the beit, when it is a prefix preposition, it means one of these three things. It means in, by, or with something. Let's take a look at some examples of these prefixes so you can see better how they work. The definite article, again, as we mentioned, is a prefixed hey patak or hey kametz. Ha is the pronunciation for both of those. When this prefix occurs before a noun, we actually add a word to the translation. So again, let's take our word sus that we've already used for the noun endings portion of this overview. Sus, samek, shurik, samek, again, is our word for horse. When we translate sus, we can translate it either as horse or a horse. Either translation is fine. But sus can have this prefix definite article, either, again, the hey patak or the hey kametz. So what we get when it's added is hasus. And note how we have to add this definite article to the translation. So hasus becomes the horse instead of horse or a horse. A is just an indefinite article in English that we can add before any noun that does not have the definite article in Hebrew. So sus is horse or a source. Hasus is the horse. Navi is prophet or a prophet. When Navi has the definite article prefixed before it, it's hey patak, and we translate this as the prophet. So note in these two cases, hasus and hanavi, the definite article actually adds an extra word to our translation. We translate the definite article with the English word the. In Hebrew, we also have a conjunction, which is a prefixed letter. As we've discussed, it's a prefixed vav with a vocal shava or the simple shava. That whole prefix translates to the word and in English. Let's take a look at it on a word or two here. Again, we have the word Seuss, which translates to a horse. But note what happens when we add this conjunction as a prefix, the Seuss. When we have this conjunction, the vav, before this word Seuss, we actually translate the word and before it. And a horse is what we end up with. Note we could also get that before the word Torah. Torah translates a law, law or a law. And when we have the Torah, we get and a law is how we translate that. So again, this is just another example of how Hebrew has this prefixed letter, the vav with the shavah, and it adds an extra letter to the translation. It adds the word and to the translation. Vasus and a horse, the Torah and a law. Note that we could have both of those prefixes together, the conjunction and the definite article, if we wanted to. If that happens, the conjunction would come first, then the definite article, then the noun. So in this first example, Melech is our noun. Melech means king. But note how we translate this whole phrase when we have two prefixed letters. The vav stands for the word and the prefixed hey stands for the word the. And so what we get is the ha melech, translated as and the king. The same we could have for the word Seuss. This is our word we've seen a couple of examples. Seuss means horse. Seuss can take both a prefixed hey, the definite article, and a prefixed vav, the conjunction, and together we get the ha Seuss, and we translate that as and the horse. So again, the word and, that's our conjunction, and comes from this prefixed vav. The is our definite article that comes from the prefix hey. So the hasus and the horse. Again, we've talked about the prefix preposition, how each of these three letters actually stands for a meaning itself when it's a prefixed letter before a noun. Again, lamed means to or for when it's a prefix. Kaf means like or as when it's a prefix. And bait means in, by, or with when it's a prefix. We'll look at a couple of examples next. So some examples of the inseparable prepositions, or we would call these the prefix prepositions, look like these examples. Again, we'll use our typical term Seuss, which means horse or a horse, to see what it looks like with these three prepositions. Note how each of them is just a prefix letter, just like with the conjunction and the definite article. It's just a different letter that we're looking at, the lamed, the kaf, or the bait. Now the lamed, when it's prefixed, again, it translates to the word to or for. So when we string this together, it's actually a phrase. La Seuss becomes to or for a horse. Then we could have the prefix kaf, which by itself or as a prefix, it means like or as. So when we have kasus, our translation is like or as a horse. And then we can have the prefix bait, which means in, by, or with. So basus means in, but with, or by a horse. So these prefixed prepositions, the lamed, the kaf, and the bait, they're simply three additional types of prefixes we can have before Hebrew words, and they each mean something separate. Now you do not need to memorize what these prefixes mean. In the translation exercises, in the homework, and on assessments, I will list these prepositions for you along with their definition, but you do want to learn and sort of see what they look like as prepositions to have a little bit of practice with them. To end, we can look at Genesis 1:1 because this verse employs each of these types of prefixes that we've talked about. So Genesis 1:1 as a full verse, we know that in the English Bible it essentially says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. But this is what it looks like in Hebrew. The first word of the Bible, of the Old Testament, is Bereshit. Now, we've already talked about this first word, reshit, in our word study discussion. Note how it looks now, reshit, with a preposition bait. So now that you know that there are three prefix prepositions, the bait, the lamed, or the kaf, you can see how this prefix looks on the very first word of the Old Testament. So breshit actually is translated as in, with, or by. Remember, the bait translates as in, with, or by when it's a preposition as a prefix. And then we translate reshit, which is beginning. Now, as you know, most English Bibles add the definite article in there and translate this as in the beginning, which is perfectly fine in that reshit can connote the beginning of something or the best of something. So breshit, bara is the word create, or he created. And then it's actually followed by the subject of the verb. That's a weird thing that Hebrew does, and we'll talk about this in our next lesson when we talk about syntax. But bara is a verb followed by its subject, Elohim, which we actually plug in as the subject of the verb. So instead of, what we get is God created. In the beginning, Elohim created, God created. And then we have this little et word. Again, we'll see this in our lesson on syntax, but et is what we call the sign of the direct object. It's just telling you that what follows is the direct object of the verb. So we don't actually translate et. Again, it's just a mark. It's a helper. What tells us that the direct object of the verb create is, so what did God create? He created ha-shamayim, the heavens. Va'et, here we have another sign of the direct object. He also created ha'aretz, the earth. So look in these, the two things that he created, the heavens and the earth. We can see our prefix definite article there in red. So shamayim is the word heavens. Ha-shamayim is the heavens. So as you can see, that definite article, the hey, is a prefix. It's a prefix hey, ha-shamayim. Ha, it translates as the, and shamayim translates as heavens. Next, what we get is a vav, which is, again, the vav is our prefixed conjunction, which translates to and it's followed by another sign of the direct object. Again, this et is just a word. We don't translate it. It's just telling you what follows is it's another direct object of the verb. And again, our last noun there, it also has a definite article. Aretz is the word for noun, for earth, sorry. Aretz translates to the word earth, and haaretz is the earth. So again, we have a prefix definite article, that hey there translates to the. So this verse shows you, again, what a prefix preposition looks like. Bereshit, the bait there is a prefix preposition. We also have our prefix conjunction ha-shamayim, the heaven, and ha'aretz, the earth. And then you can see also an example of that conjunction, the prefixed vav there. So we will talk about syntax a little bit more in the following lesson, but this gives you an idea of what these prefixes look like.